Okay. So yesterday we were discussing the sugya of Eishes Ach Shaloi Hayu Ba'olamo, as a commentator taught us to call it Ashpa. Okay. I was thinking Ashpa last night as I'm learning. Okay, so we talked about Eishes Ach Shaloi Hayu Ba'olamo, which is one of the ervas. It's an erva in the Torah. The Torah tells us that two brothers who are not contemporary brothers, they have not lived at the same time. The one died before the other one was born. The one who was born, although they technically share parents, they're not really in halacha considered brothers in the fullest sense of the word, because since they weren't, at least as it pertains to Yibam, they weren't b'yeshuvo shel olam. They did not sit at the same time in the same world. They weren't yeshu yachtav. They have to be alive at the same time, and so therefore there's an area called Eishes Hashel Olamo. We saw machlokas between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon. I don't know if we're looking at here. We saw machlokas between the first Mishnah on Daf Yud Zayin and the second Mishnah on Daf Yud Ches, where we saw that there's a machlekes between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim for sure in the second Mishnah. This is the case where, in our classic examples, Levi is being born only after Reuven does Yibum. So since he's being born into a world of Heter, he's being a world where Rachel's already married. Reb Shimon argued that over there that's not called an Eishes Hashel Ha'olamo, because although Rachel, of course, was married to Shimon, his brother, who he never met, by marrying Reuven, it's effectively like removes that history. It's like we cut off whatever happened in the past. That's the opinion of Reb Shimon. He saw a very interesting shita of Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Shaya's opinion.
I'm very cold.
What?
I have a cold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm cold. Yeah.
You know that, okay, you can ask Dr. Dan to confirm this. A cold is a form of coronavirus. I just want to.
Right.
Am I wrong?
It is. You're right.
I am
I
correct.
told
My doctor tells me I had coronavirus.
I took a test.
And I had
No, I'm just saying technically you have coronavirus.
Oh.
Yeah, this is just how marketing and talking works. Okay. We call okay. Either way, so is it related to what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
yeah.
Okay.
For those of you that might, what really helped me, and I know probably everyone gets it, but there's a chart on this book, 18, on page 113. It has the old Mishnah, which Reb Kevin just mentioned,
Mhm.
you know, and the one we just learned, and it really helped me. It really helped me understand this. Right?
All right.
Yeah.
Take a look at it later. Right now, we're going to
Yeah,
continue. Okay. So we had an interesting opinion. Reb Shaya's opinion, which we're still in the middle of dealing with, he had the opinion that Reb Shimon, who argues, not only does he argue in a case when the Yibum is performed first and then Levi is born, he'll even argue in a case where the Yibum is performed after Levi is born, meaning Levi is born, and when he is born, Rachel is just a floating widow of a brother who he never met, which really should for sure be an ashpa, right? But even over there, says Rabbi Shai, Reb Shimon would say no. Why? Because he has this interesting shita that says that he'll take Zika to the third level. He takes it all the way that Zika is already considered like you married. And since the Zika is like you married, that means the second Shimon died, Rachel and Reuven were like basically married. And if they're married, then that really means the case of the first Mishnah and the case of the second Mishnah are in concept the same. When Levi is being born, he's born into a world where his brother Reuven is already married to these two ladies. One is where he's actually married through Yibam, and the other one is where he's conceptually married through the concept of Zika Kiknusa we talked about. This is Rabbi Shai's opinion, which is a very big chiddush and very interesting. But he had some support for it because the idea behind it was the fact that why even bring the first Mishnah at all? The whole purpose of the first Mishnah is not for the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan, the bigger chiddush is in the second Mishnah. So really, if all the first Mishnah was there for is to teach me things about the Rabbanan, all I would need is the second Mishnah. And Kol Shekan, I know the first Mishnah. Clearly, the first Mishnah is coming to tell me something about Reb Shimon. That's Rabbi Shaya's starting off point. And then he says this chiddush of Zika Kiknusa. We brought a Gemara a question yesterday, which we will not go into super detail, but I'll just say high level. The Gemara had a question. Reb Shimon, in a certain case, I don't have it on the board here. The case I think is on, it's on the board over here, but whatever it is, there was another case where Reb Shimon clearly held that the Zika is not Kiknusa. In fact, even a Zika and a Maimer wasn't going to be enough. And we answered that maybe you could say that was because there was an extra brother. The Zika Kiknusa only works when you have one brother. And therefore you can say that it's focused in on that one brother, then it works to say like it's married. Whereas if it's dissipated throughout other brothers, no. That was Abaye's answer. But then the Gemara said, even if you say that, I have a separate brisa. And this was the knockout punch, I think, for the Gemara. And the Gemara had said the following. There's a brisa where Reb Shimon specifically talks about these two dinim. And he says as follows. He says his halacha here And he says the same thing over here, meaning he says over there, it's not going to be a problem of Ashba, and over here it is. And the Gemara wants to prove that it must be this type of case where there's only one brother. And if it's only one brother, then that's a knockout punch. The Gemara said, no.
Brother.
We could also be talking about a case where we introduced the Yehuda. I'm not going to flip it over every time, where there was a second brother and therefore was not Zika. That was how the Gemara wanted to answer, but the Gemara was bothered because that entire brisa was introduced by Reb Shimon saying, Zeh haklal. The following is the rule. To say the phrase Zeh haklal, the following is the rule, and then to go give a very unique one scenario case that is only very specific when there's an extra brother, which we wouldn't even thought to talk about, the language of Zeh haklal is not really consistent. You could have said this is the halacha, and it would be a true statement. But to start it by saying Zeh haklal, if you come on a Tuesday between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, once you start saying to such a specific thing, the phrase Zeh haklal, the general rule, is inconsistent. So the Gemara assumes, this seems to be a good strong question, that the statement of Reb Shimon, where he says that it's not an erva, will be limited to the case of the second Mishnah when the Yibum happens after he's born versus a case where the Yibum happens before he's born.
We don't go by him anyway.
Doesn't matter. We're learning the Gemara. Yeah, I mean, if we're not learning Gemara, we're open Shulchan Aruch 100%. We hold the Yesh Zika. And we also don't hold Zika Kiknusa, correct. And by Yesh Yisach, we don't pass like him. Again, when I say we don't pass like him, find me a case where in practical practice it matters. I mean, really, how many times are we coming up with a Yesh Yisach? But I mean, could be this has never happened. I mean, this is, whatever. Okay, so that was the first question, and that was the Gemara held by that. Now we're holding by a second question, which the Gemara will have an answer to, but not a good answer, and then we'll move on from Rabbi Shai. V'od. We're holding 4 lines from the thick lines. V'od Massive, and here, just to make this Gemara that much more confusing, the person asking this question is also named Rav Shai, but it happens to be a completely different person. We couldn't find a Rav Papa, a Rav Chizda, a Rav Huna. We have to say it's Rav Shai. It's Rav Shai. V'od Massive Rav Shai. Rav Shai. So Tosfos over here and Rashi earlier in the Masechta explains to us that really in the Gemara when we first mentioned Rebbe Shai, it didn't say Rebbe Yishaya, but really you should. The Tukei Sofim calls him Rebbe Yishaya. So the first one is Rebbe Yishaya, and this one's Rav Yishaya. They're both Amoraim, one's from Yishlayim, one's from. So if the Gemara wasn't difficult enough as it is, we have Reb Shimon's and Shimon's, we have Rebbe Shaya's and Rebbe Yishayas, and we have multiple different cases. So most of Rebbe Shaya. This is a person asking a question. And this question, this is the last time we'll mention his name, so it's not going to be confusing, but just to point out. What's the question? I have a brisa. Gimel achin shnayim mehen nesuin shtei achios. Do I have this up on the board? This I might have to flip over. I don't know if I have it on the board. Yeah. 8. Yeah. Okay. Gimel achin, 3 brothers. Shnayim mehen nesuin shtei achios. Right? So you have Reuben and Shimon married to Rachel and Leah and their sisters. Yeah. Oh, or... and here are the rest of them I didn't write, and you'll see why in a minute. Oh, Isha Ubita, or the 2 women that Reuven and Rachel are married to are a mother and a daughter. Oh, Isha Ubasbita, or a mother and a granddaughter through the daughter. Oh, Isha Ubasbano, or a mother and a granddaughter through the son. So you have basically 4 scenarios. In either Reuven and Shimon happen to be married to 2 ladies that if they should be married to one man, that would be a problem because they're erva. Either they're their sisters, their mother and daughter, mother and granddaughter. The Chachamim Shita, predicated on the idea, we're assuming here of Yesh Zika, which would be one raya, like a common saying that we pass in Yesh Zika. Predicated on the idea of Yesh Zika, when Reuven and Shimon die, well, Levi has a Zika from each of the houses with 2 sisters. Well, if you hold of Zika, then that means each one of them is the sister of my Zika, my Achos Kukaso, sister of my Zika is a problem. Only if you hold Yesh Zika. If you hold Ein Zika, no problem. And you can do Yibum with one and do Chalitz with the other. But if you hold Yesh Zika, you can't do Yibum with any of them because at least with the Rabbanan, each one of them is like the sister of my wife, right? The sister of my Zika. So that's the Shita of the Chachamim. Choltzos v'lo misyabos. Very good. Reb Shimon Pater, Reb Shimon says no. Not only no Yibum with either one of them, no Chalitza with either one of them. Everyone's Pater. The Reuven and Shimon die. Rachel and Leah get to go marry whoever they want. They're not stuck to Levi. There's no Chalitza. There's no Zika. There's no nothing. The question is, why? So we'll see later in the Gemara it's going to be a pasuk. But for now, the Gemara is bothered. Says the Gemara. And this is going to be the second attempt to make a knockout punch, a second successful attempt to make a knockout punch of Reb Shimon. And if you're going to say this unique chiddush of Rabbi Shai, that once you have Zika, it's like they're mamish married. So then says the Gemara, one of them had to die first, right? Even if they were in a car accident, one of them had to die first. So let's make the assumption we know which one died first, and we'll say that Shimon died first. Okay? So let's say Shimon died first. Says the Gemara, Liyabim lekamaisa. Let Levi be miyabim Shimon's wife Rachel. Why? Because let's say Shimon died first. So in that moment, Rachel became his wife. And in that moment, Rachel is his wife. Then who is Leah? Leah is already his achos isha, right? He's already the sister of my wife. Well, that means now when Reuven dies, isn't his wife Leah an erva to me? So of course I should be able to finish my yibum with Rachel because she's my wife. She's Zika Kiknusa. I'm already married to her. It's just a formality. Go finish it off.
Even if she dies before you did it.
Meaning, yeah, it doesn't make a difference. Even if she dies before I did the yibum, because Zika Kiknusa, if we're relying on that svara. And over here, you'll say, well, 1 second, when Shimon dies, he's got 2 brothers. Maybe we don't say Zika Kiknusa, but that's not true. Because since Reuven is married to Leah already, when Shimon dies, Rachel doesn't fall to Reuven. There is no Zika between Rachel and Reuven, so it's really the equivalent of Rachel only falling to Levi. It's like one brother. So this should be a classic case of Zika Kiknusa. This should work. So says the Gemara, why is Rav Shimon saying that Levi is potter with Rachel and Leah, and they both go free? He should be able to do even to Rachel, meaning he should be able to do even whichever one died first. Yeah. So he's standing now. He's got 2 brothers dead. Got 2 wives falling to him. The first one is his wife. The second one doesn't fall ever because she's an erva, right? That's the Gemara's question. So says the Gemara, so in our case, we'll say Rachel will be tipater and Leah should become potter. So the Gemara at first says a technical answer. Amr of Amram, my poter. When Rav Shimon said poter, it's exactly what he meant. He said poter. He means nami poter b'shnia. He means you're right. Meaning do yibam with Rachel and Leah's poter. Meaning he tries to shtup in what we just said as a question into the words of Rav Shimon. So says the Gemara, that's problematic. Why? Because Vahatanya, we have a separate brisa touching on the same topic, whereas Rav Shimon poter b'shtei. And there the language he uses is Rav Shimon says, no, both of them are poter. And clearly, what does both mean? Both here means both ladies, both Rachel and Leah. That means they're both going free without yibum, without chalitza, everything's good to go. So now Rava says a very difficult answer, not that complicated to think about, but I'm going to turn it a little bit so everyone can see. We're up at number 9. I'm a Rava. Rava says, no. When the Brisa says poter b'shteihen, and when Reb Shimon said poter, what did he mean? He means the following. I'm going to say it outside. I didn't draw completely because when I was running out of time on Erev Shabbos, and I was also running out of a little room. So I'll just say it pretty clear. So what did the Brisa say? The Brisa said we have 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Reuven and Shimon are married to 2 ladies who, and the way I introduced it was they're either married to sisters, they're married to mother and daughter, and mother and granddaughter into different scenarios. But we assumed that was all 4 of those cases were just 4 different examples of what those 2 ladies could be. But theoretically speaking, if let's say the Brisa had been written instead of Aleph Vav O, if the O was just a Vav, so it was this, this, you could theoretically speaking have read it as end, not O, end, not or, end. So that would mean that what's the case? Reuven and Shimon are married, each to 4 ladies. Reuven is married to a mother, and then he's married, Reuven's married to a sister, a mother, and 2 grandmothers. And Shimon's married to a sister, a daughter, and 2 granddaughters. If that makes sense. Meaning, and that's completely fine. Those 4 connections are unrelated to each other. It's just they happen to both be married to 4 ladies. Each of them have a relative that the other one's married to. Right? So just like you can have Rachel and Leah, it could have been Rachel, Leah, Penina and Dina, who were mother and daughter, and whatever. I'm not coming up with other names, but you get the idea. So says Rava, that's what's pshat. And therefore, when it says poter b'shtein, he means the second group of ladies completely poter.
Ziga.
Right. Meaning he's basically saying, La'olam, it's exactly what we're saying. La'olam, when Reuven dies, all 4 of those ladies fall to Levi. Sorry, when Shimon dies, my bad. When Shimon dies, all 4 of his wives, here I only wrote Rachel, but it'll be other ladies. All 4 of those ladies, the sister, the mother, the granddaughter, and the other grandmother and the grandmother, 4 of those ladies fall to Levi, and he picks one of them to do Yibam, because again, Shimon has, it's only one house. Yibam's going to knock one. Yibam with one will knock all 4 of them out. And the other 4 ladies are pater. They get to go free. Why? Because they're all, because once Shimon dies, the Zika of all 4 of those ladies are Kiknusa. And therefore the other 4 of them are the Karov. They're the Erva relationship with my wife. Now you might ask a very intelligent question on Rava. How could you say Zika Kiknusa on all 4 ladies? Because that's what he's saying. In order to pater all of the other 4 ladies, the only way that works is if you say Zika Kiknusa on all 4 ladies that Shimon is married to. Right? When Shimon dies and all 4 fall to Reuven, that Zika Kiknusa means now Levi is married to the sister, the mother, and the 2 grandmothers. But if we just said earlier that Zika Kiknusa can't be done between when you have more than one brother because it dissipates, why don't we say that the Zika Kiknusa here dissipates? It's I think, a very strong question. It's a slightly different thing because when we talk about the zika separating between brothers, that makes sense. A woman cannot be married to two men, but a man can be married to two women. So the fact that each one of the four ladies that are married to Shimon fall to Levi, right? That zika, they all have a zika. And since they all have a zika and they all could theoretically speaking be married, the only reason why they can't be married to them is because there's a halacha yibum. You only do yibum with one of them, otherwise it's an eshazach. But if theoretically speaking, a man can be married to four women. So these four women's zika, at least in the world of yibum, is called zika keknusa. So at least in that halacha, we'll say that the other four ladies that are married to Reuven right now, each one of them is an achos kukaso and a whatever bas whatever the erva relationship would be. So therefore, that's Rava's opinion. So says Rava, that's Pshat and Reb Shimon. And La'olam, the Bryce is not difficult because the Bryce is talking about a case where when it said Poter B'Shteyan meant the second group of ladies. Let's just read it inside. I'm a Rava. Shniya shebezug zeh v'shniya shebezug zeh. When it says Poter B'Shteyan, Shteyan means the second group of ladies. And really it fits, and you can still say Zika Kiknus. So says the Gemara, no. Katai, Gemara is going to three knock, call it strike one, strike two, and strike three. Says the Gemara. Rava made a mistake. Katai Rava be'arba zugi. He made a mistake in the four groups listing in the Brisa. First things question. Chada. What was the first problem with the Rava said?
Right.
The o katani. It didn't say and. It said or. It said sister or daughter or grandmother or grandmother. It didn't say and. It said or. So that shot becomes difficult on its face. V'od, strike two. Reb Shimon poter ba'arba asan mibayale. Meaning, according to the way Rav is saying it, b'shteyen doesn't make sense. Pottering with two. It's four ladies. So it should have said ba'arba asan. So strike two.
Isn't one of them, he's not Potter? What's the
No. It's the second group of ladies. It's all of the ladies that, let's say, Reuven would be married to. When Shimon dies, four ladies fall to Levi, right?
Every second one.
And every one of the other ladies are Potter, because once they fall to Levi, there's a Zika Keknusa with all four of them, which means it's technically like he's quote unquote married to all four. And who are the other four ladies? The ones married to Reuven? All of the Kar, they're all relatives of him. And what's the strike three? Tanya Reb Shimon Poter B'Shtei, and I have a separate brisa where when he said it Poter B'Shtei mina chalitzu mina yibam, and he had a pasuk. Shene'amar v'isha alachos lo sikach litzrar. The pasuk teaches us that a man should not take his wife's sister, and you should not do a litzur. And he has a special drasa. He darshans the word litzur to mean b'shah shenasu tzaros zulazu. And here's the only time you'll hear the word tzaros referring to not co-wives, but here it actually means two ladies coming from the same home. But they become tzaros because if they would be married to Levi, they'd be tzaros, right? So what he's saying is lo yehei l'chal likuchin afilu b'achas man. This drasha basically means that if it's exactly coming to address this situation when you have two brothers who die and now Krovim are falling to Levi. If he manages one of them, right, the other one's an erva. So therefore, we said before, according to Reb Shimon, you should say Zika Keknusa and make it that they're married. Do even with one, and just the other one goes free. This pasuk is coming to teach me specifically in this case that you don't do that. And it's on that the Gemara is saying, well, why not? Why not say Zika Keknusa? If you hold like Reb Shimon, you should say Zika Keknusa. So basically, the Gemara is saying that three separate reasons Rava's answer doesn't work. In the end of the day, why does Reb Shimon hold that Rachel and Leah, even if it's just, forget the case of 4 and 4, now back to a case of Rachel and Leah, just two sisters. Why are Rachel and Leah both Potter? Because the pasuk says that in a scenario where Reuven and Shimon die and Rachel and Leah fall to Levi, the pasuk tells us that they're both Potter. So there's a kasha.
So Zika's not Kenusa?
So Zika's not, well, the problem, it's a kasha. I mean, the kasha is, but if you say Zika Keknusa, even though you have a Xeris HaKasav that says that they're both Potter, Zika Keknusa should still allow him to be Miyabim Rachel.
Even with Xeris HaKasav?
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference. The Torah says that they would both be, he doesn't have to do Yibum with either one of them. It doesn't have to do Chalitz with either one of them. But if you say Zika Keknusa and one of them died before the other, which is the assumption, then that first one who died had a marriage relationship, and then the other one should be Potter, should do Yibum with the first one. So the Gemara says, Alama Ravashi, this is Ravashi is going to be answering it as a dochak. It's a difficult answer, but it'll somehow explain the brisa. You're right, correct. Right, meaning if the case was that it fell where Shimon died first, so Shimon got knocked in the head and died, and then a couple of minutes later, then Reuven died. So you're right. When that happens, the first death creates a Zika Kiknusa with the first wife. They're married. So now when Reuven dies, his wife is coming to Levi already, quote unquote, married to her sister. So of course that's a classic case of an erva not falling, and so you should do even with the first, and the chalitza isn't going to even be needed with the second. She goes free. And what is the case of Reb Shimon's brisa where he brings a pasuk to tell me that you don't do it? Says Rav Ashi, the nafal b'basachas. Reuven and Shimon died at the exact same moment. Now you might say, how's that possible? One of them had to have died first.
No, they're on they're taking a car ride or they're on a horse and they hit it like that.
So if I had them hooked up to
even that,
if I had them hooked up to a what's it called? The thing with the heart, the cardiogram, whatever it's called. Which one of them would flatline first? Someone flatline first. Unless you tell me they flatline. I might not know which one, but one of them had to have died first. Right? Just speak it out. If one of them had to have died first, then that means one of this guy's wives is my wife. I just don't know which one, but one of them died first. Whichever one died first, his wife's is my wife. And now the other one is my Erev. I just don't know which, so therefore maybe I'll do chalitza to both, Rashi says. But if you would say that they died at the same time, you haven't helped anything. So says the Gemara, no. Reb Shimon Savalak Reb Yossi Aglili. Reb Shimon holds like Reb Yossi Aglili, who holds the Omar Efshel Tzamtzim. He holds in halacha, we can say that if it's a scenario where it's hard to tell, we halachically treat it like it's happening at the exact same moment. So since we halachically, even though you're right, technically speaking, in physical reality, it's almost impossible to have. I mean, it's possible. They could at the same microsecond have died, but very unlikely. Very. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it's talking about a different sugya entirely. It's talking about hilchos bechoros. Allah is you got to give your first animals to the Kohen. What if you have two animals that pop out a baby like mamash at the same time? This animal and that animal. Which one's the bechor? I'm not sure. This one comes first. That one comes first. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili has an opinion that you say Efshel Tzamtzem, and we could say pick one. We'll say whatever it is, or you have to give both to the Kohen, whatever. But whatever, we're borrowing that idea. Let's not talk about that over here. What we're talking about over here is that really Reb Shimon needs a pasuk to tell me that when two women are falling to Levi at the exact same moment, I have a pasuk to tell me that you don't do Yibam or Chalitza to either one of them. They're completely free to go because of Litzver, that you don't have to do it if it's going to be a problem. But if they die out of order, whoever dies first, Zika Keknusa, and the other one is going to be at the, and really La'olam, the entire case of Reb Shimon's opinion is specifically talking about where Reuven and Shimon died, at the exact same moment. It makes this brisa very, very unique and rare. I mean, the likelihood of a case like that even happening is almost impossible. But either way, so the second question, we sort of have an answer. The answer is very, very questionable. We have another question. The first one we mentioned, which was pretty strong, which it could be right now, we would say it's enough. Rabbi Yoshi is done. Zika Kiknusa seems like it's dead in the water. The Gemara continues. We bring a second opinion. This is going to be the opinion that we had thought of Rav Shimon from the very beginning. Rav Papa, back to regularly scheduled programming, is going to tell us that when Rav Shimon said what he said it where he said it, and he didn't say it where he didn't say it. He's going to say very obvious stuff. Rav Papa Amar, no. Rav Shimon only argues if Levi is born into a world where Yibam has been done already. And therefore, in that case, Rachel is already married to Reuven. Now when Levi is then born, Levi's born into a world where Reuven's married to Dinah and Rachel. Reuven dies. Both of those ladies are his Yibams because Shimon holds that you have amnesia. We don't look back in the past and say, well, she was once married to the brother Shimon. She's married to Reuven now, and that's all we care about. But in the case where the Yibam happens only after Levi's born first, finds Rachel floating, she's an erva. She's an Eishes Achshel HaBalam. She's an Ashbez, as Kama tells us. He doesn't argue there. He agrees with the Chachamim. Of course, when Levi was born, he was born into a world where this woman, Rachel, was the wife of his dead brother who he never met. That's an erva. And you asked Rabbi Shaya, why have the first Mishnah? We need both Mishnayos. And you're right, although normally we wouldn't like to really repeat ourselves, says Rapapa, this is a case where you're right. The first Mishnah really wasn't truly needed for the Rabbanan, but we wanted to teach it in an increasing order of Chiddush. First, teach the first din, that the Chachamim say their din in a case where the Levi is born before Yibam. And the Chiddush of the second Mishnah is the rabbis go even further to say that it's going to be a problem even if Levi's born after the Yibam. And on that, Rav Shimon argues. That is the opinion of Rav Papa, which is how we learned, by the way, right up until we got to the Chesed Beis. Rav Shia seems Rav Papa's arguing. Rav Papa says, Zika Kiknusa, what does that even mean? There's no such thing. There is Yesh Zika, there's Ein Zika, it's only with the Rabbanan. There's no such thing as a third level of Zika Kiknusa. And everything seems to, with Rav Papa, go back to sort of the normal way we would have thought, the way we were learning Rav Shimon and the Chachamim before we even got to the Sugya. Says the Gemara, not only that, Tanya Kos the Rav Papa, I have another brisa, which will prove Rav Papa, and it will be Tiyuf to the Rabbi Shia, will put the third strike, the nail in the coffin, say Rabbi Shia's Shita is going to be pushed away. Says the Gemara, what's the brisa? This I don't have on the board. I don't think I have this on the board. So
Is
hopefully,
this the one with the 9 brothers?
I don't know what you're talking about.
9 brothers, the one that.
I don't have a 9 brother case. I don't even remember a 9 brother case. Could be. I don't know. Maybe I learned it incorrectly. When we get there, we'll see. Shnei achim ba'olam echad. Reuven, this is just going to be a brisa that's going to be describing. In fact, let me flip this because it's actually going to be. I don't really have these 2 cases. We're going to go back to the first, the Mishnayos. Yeah. Okay. You guys see? Okay. Okay. Says the brisa. The brisa is going to be describing these 2 cases. Reb Shimon and the Chacham. Says the brisa as follows.
Where do you write all this?
Erev Shabbos.
Yes.
Erev
I
Shabbos.
was gonna say, there's no way I was
No,
here
no,
today.
no.
It's only been 20 minutes when I came
Came
in.
in a little early
Shabbos.
before davening. And,
Well,
because yesterday I knew we needed charts and I wasn't going to be able to draw some. So it says the Gemara. Shnei achim ba'olam echad. Reuven and Shimon are alive. They're brothers, regular normal brothers. They're alive together, and they each married a lady. We'll say like our classic case. Shimon married to Rachel, Reuven married to Dinah. Umeis echad mehem b'loi vlad, and Shimon dies without children. So there's a kibum. The Amad Hasheni Hazeh La'azaz Maimer b'Yevimtai. And this Sheni, Reuven wants to do Maimer. He wants to do Maimer. We'll see in a minute that the Gemara is going to explain why they're even telling this to us. So basically, he tried to do Maimer, didn't do Maimer. The Maimer didn't count. We'll have to figure out exactly what he's talking about. But the bottom line is, it was a non-event. He wanted to do Maimer, he didn't do Maimer. So he didn't do Maimer. Mazel tov. So what happens? It's a classic case. Shimon died, and his wife fell to Reuven. And now Levi is born. So in this case, nothing has been done. No Yibum, no Maimer, no nothing. So classic case of Eishes Lama. Levi is being born. Rachel is floating. She's an erva. Nothing to talk about. Harishona Rachel Yotza Mishum Eishes Lama. She's an Eishes Lama. She's an Ashba. Ushniya Dina. Dina's just married to Shimon, to Reuven. Sorry, right. So if Reuven dies. Again, no Yibam been done. There's only one wife for Reuven. This is mamish about as vanilla cases you can get. Oh, chaletz tomas Yevamos. Even the Chachamim would agree to this. This is 100% no questions asked. This isn't even in any of these Mishnayos, right? Levi is an erva with Rachel, but fine with Dinah, and Reuven has never had any marriage whatsoever with Rachel. So all he has is one wife, Dinah, falling. Levi is a contemporary brother to Reuven, so there's no problem here. That's the first case. The second case is going to be discussing the Maimer. Osaba Maimer. Let's say. Start again. Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon's got a wife, Rachel. Reuven's got a wife, Dinah, and Shimon dies. And after Shimon dies, Reuven does Maimer. Right? Asa ba Maimer. So now Rachel and Reuven have a Rabbanan marriage. Right? So we'll use it as a model. But instead of it saying Yibum there, what it'll say is Reuven did Maimer with Rachel. So now Reuven has a wife, Dinah min Torah, and a Rabbanan wife with Rachel. On a Torah level, Rachel is still connected to Shimon. When Shimon died, and there's a Zika min HaTorah that Reuven has with Rachel, but he did Maimer. He should now do Yibam and finish it, but okay. But before he could do any of that, his brother Levi is born. So now Levi is being born into a world where Shimon, his brother, is dead. Reuven is alive. Reuven is married to Dinah min HaTorah, and Midrabbanan married to Maimer. Maimered to Rachel, but min HaTorah, Rachel is still a connection of she's a floater, so to speak, from Shimon. Or a case, Shenola Loach, Levi is being born, and then So here, this case in the Brisa, we're not really distinguishing between when the Maimer was done. As long as it was done before Reuven died. If Reuven is dying with a connection of Maimer to Rachel and regular marriage to Dinah, says the Brisa Umeis, Reuven dies, Harishona Yotza Mishum Eishes Lamo, the first one, Rachel. She's an Eishes Achshel Ha'Ba'olam because on a Torah level, she's still connected to Shimon. So from Shimon's perspective, from Levi's perspective, Rachel's an erva. So nothing to talk about. She does not get a Yibam or a Chalitza. The only question is going to be Dinah. What's the problem with Dinah? On a Torah level, she needs a Yibam or a Chalitza. But on a Derabanan level, since Reuven did Maimer to Rachel, it's a little bit on a Derabanan level like Dinah's a Tzaras Erva. So since she's a Tzaras Erva, says the Gemara, Ushniya choletzes v'lo misyabemes. Rabbanan require chalitza no yibam because on a Torah level she would have been fine, but on a Rabbanan level it's like a tzaras erva, so no actual physical act of yibam. So far, everything I've said is pretty straightforward. Remember, we're trying to bring a brisa and a knock out of Shimon. So far, we've said nothing about Rav Shimon. That's the second case of Maimer. So again, this brisa is brought in 3 stages. Stage 1 is nothing was done. Stage 2 is Mimer was done. Let's talk about stage 3 now.
Why is Tina a Sarah to Rachel, but they're not?
Remember, if Reuven did Mimer to Rachel, then on a Derabanan level, he's married to her. So that means on a Derabanan level, she's a Tzaras Erva. If she was a true Tzaras Erva, then they should be Potter. A Derabanan Tzaras Erva just says, don't do Yibam, but you still need Chalitza. Now, Reb Shimon says, within this second case of this Mimer case, and this Gemara is going to address this in Reb Shimon now later, so I will not attempt to explain it in any much detail. He says, and I'm just going to say what Rashi tells us the words mean. Reb Shimon says that if Ruvain is to do Bia or Chalitza, if Levi is to do Bia or Chalitza, meaning Yibum or Chalitza with Dina, that would be Poteris Rachel. So we'll have to see what this means. This doesn't make sense right now, but we'll get to it in the Gemara. However, Chalatz leba'alas Mamer, if he did Chalitza with Rachel, right now, we don't know enough about Reb Shimon, what he's saying right here in this brisa, to even understand a bit of what he just said. The Gemara, after we finish the brisa, we'll come back to it. So for now, we'll leave that. The next line is the beginning of what we need. The third case of the brisa, the third case is talking about Yibam. So the first case was where nothing was done. The second case where Maimer was done, and the third case is where Yibam is done. This is going to be these two cases. Says the Gemara, but it adds a little bit of a wrinkle. Kansa, let's say Ruvain did Yibam with Rachel. Right, so Shimon dies, Reuven does Yibam. Umes, and now Reuven dies. This we haven't seen yet. Reuven is now dying. So who is Rachel and Dina? Both of them are ladies that are floating. And now Levi's born. This is about as simple as the cases you can get. This is Eishes Akshal according to every single possible variation. Levi is born with no brothers. They're all dead already. He never met any of them. Who are these wives? They are the wives of his dead brothers, who he never met. Of course, this is Eishes Akshal Ha'Balama. There's not a single opinion out there who would say that this isn't a problem of Ashba. Yeah? Oh, Shenolad Loach, or rather, after Shimon dies, Rachel falls to Reuven, and Reuven doesn't have a chance to do anything, right? Levi is born, and then Reuven does Yibam. So this is a case of the first Mishnah, right? Levi is born before Yibam. Levi is born before Yibam, then Umeis Reuven, and now Reuven dies. Shtein Peturas Mina Chalitza Mina Yibam. They're both putter from Chalitza Mina Yibam. Why? For very obvious reasons. In both of those scenarios I just mentioned, Levi is born into a world where Rachel, at least for sure, is an Eishes Akshal Ha'Balama according to all opinions. So far, everything's good. Next case. Kansa v'nolad lo'ach. This is going to be this case. This is the case where Reuven did Yibam. So now he's married to Dina and Rachel 100%. And then he has a brother born Levi. And now Reuven dies. So Reuven is dying, leaving over two 100% wives to Levi. Says the Chachamim, which will be consistent with the Chacham Shita, Shtein Peturos Mina Chalitza Mina Yibam. They're both putter. Why? Because according to the Chachamim, marrying Reuven did not solve anything for Rachel. Rachel is still an Ashba. She's still an Eishes Akshal Ha'Balama. So she's a Tzaras Erva. Dina would be a Tzaras Erva. So they're both putter. This is the classic case of our Mishnah. Meaning our Mishnah Daf Beis. Divrei Reb Meir, we just found who the author of the Chachamim are. We keep on saying the Chacham, we know it's Reb Meir, which makes sense. The Mishnah is Reb Meir. So our Mishnah and all the Mishnayos are Reb Meir. Reb Meir is the opinion who holds that Eishes Akshal Ha'Balama, we don't care when Levi was born. If Rachel was once married to a brother who he never met, she's always going to be usher to him. And we'll see at the end of the Gemara today, hopefully, exactly why he says that versus Reb Shimon. I know that's something that you struggle with. Seems one is more logical than the other, and we'll get to that. Continues the brisa, and here's the line we need to be the Tiyufta de Reboshia and the Raya for Reb Papa. For Reb Shimon Omer, Reb Shimon says, Hoyalubo Matzah Beheter. Since when Levi was born, he was born into a world where Rachel was Beheter, meaning already married to Ruvain. And there was never a moment in practical time where Rachel was practically usher to him as an Eishes Akshal Ha'Balama, because the moment he was born, she was already married to Ruvain. He can either do Yibam with Dina or Rachel, or Chalitza is mentioned, so you can do Chalitza with Rachel or Dina, because again, according to him, Rachel is not an Erva, in which case Dina is not a Tzaras Erva, so they're both married to Ruvain, no questions asked, Ruvain dies, Levi could do whatever he wants. So far, this isn't a punch-out. All we know is we've just repeated the Mishnah, but the way we repeated it, just let's understand the structure. First, we had the Chachamim tell me three cases. Case number one, you didn't do anything. Case number two, you did Maimer. Case number three, you did Yibam. Within the Yibam case, we broke it down even further. First, we said two scenarios that everyone that seems would agree is for sure Erva, and it said over there, no Chalitza, no Yibam, because of because it's Eishes Achshel Hoy Lamo and it's Tzar Zerba. And then we brought a third case, which is the case of this second Mishnah, where there Reb Shimon all of a sudden piped up and said something. Ask the Gemara. Habava Desteifa, this last case, Leman Ketanila, who are you teaching that for? Right? Meaning, what is the purpose of that last case? It can't be for the Chachamim. Ilema le Rav Meir, the Chachamim Ketani, that's the reason why you brought it. Let's figure this out. Michti. Right? We know that Rav Meir doesn't care when the Yibum happens. His opinion is that once Levi is born and the wife of a brother who he never met exists, that woman cannot get rid of that stain. She is forever and ever and ever and ever. So then if that last case is being taught for Rav Meir, La'arvinu v'lisninu, why did he have to create a whole new bava? The first case, Paskins, and then bring a second case in Paskins. According to Rav Meir, the halach is the same in all three of those cases. There would be no reason to split that last case up at all. Obviously, the only reason why we're doing it is to tell me that in that last case, Reb Shimon must argue. That's what the Gemara says. Elalav Reb Shimon. It's in order to help us with Reb Shimon. To teach me that he argues when the Yibum happens first, and Levi's born into a world where the Yibum is already done. However, Benola ve'akach Yibum, if Levi had been born first and the Yibum done only after, loy palik, meaning he only argues in the second Mishnah, not in the first Mishnah, Shma Mina, strike three, knockout punch, Rabbi Shai is done. We really have three kashas, two of them bombs, one of them we were able to answer with Rabashi saying they died at the exact same moment. Really, Rabbi Shai is done, Rapap is the one we go with, and at the end of the day, we restore order over here. Says the Gemara Weiter Amar Mar 823. Okay, Amar Mar. Let's go back to the Brisa. The Brisa had to remember three scenarios. The first scenario where nothing was done, the second scenario where Mimer was done, and the third scenario which we just discussed. Let's go back to the first scenario. First scenario, what did it say? It said if you did nothing, then the halacha is that okay, so you have an Eishes Achshel Hoy Lamo, and you have a Taras Eishes Achshel Hoy Lamo. Nothing to talk about. Classic case. Gemara had a funny lashon. It said, if you tried to do Mimer and you didn't do Mimer. What was that? Says the Gemara, Amar Mar. Amad Hasheni Lasas Mimer Biyavimto. Let's say our case. Reuven tried to do Mimer with Rachel, but like Hispik Lasas Mimer Biyavimto, but he wasn't able to. Ask the Gemara. Sorry, continues the Brisa. Ad Shenoda Loyach, then Levi's born, Umeis, and Reuven dies. Rishona Rachel Yotz Mishum Eish Zach Shalhai Lamo. Ushnia Oichaletz Zam Yevamos. Because really Reuven was never married to the both of them, so Dina is a regular Yevama, and therefore she falls. Ask the Gemara. My Amad Umay Lo Hispik. What is going on here? He tried to, but he didn't. He Avad. It's a very simple question. Either he did the mimer or he didn't do the mimer. What are you telling me his intentions were? I care what his intentions are. Either he got the mimer done or he didn't get the mimer done. If he didn't get the mimer done, just say the case without even mentioning mimer. And if he did get the mimer done, well, that's the second case of the Brisa, where it says Ella no. Amad Midaita. He wanted to do mimer and he wanted her to acquiesce. He wanted her to be involved, meaning he wanted her to want to take the mimer. But she wasn't interested. But he said, "I don't care. I'm giving you the cash for kedusha." Throws the money at her and says, "You're my Yevamos." Okay. So now the question is that work? Does that mimer take or not? The issue is going to be that it doesn't take, because that's why in the first case she's not connected to Reuven at all. That mimer that was done bal karchach is worthless. Now, who says that? Why would I even need to teach me a case like that? Because apparently there's a machlekes. Right. Or the like Rabbi. Rabbi has an opinion that holds that mimer bal karchach works. Meaning you can shaft, you can create a bonon marriage against a woman's will. Says the Gemara, what's Rabbi's opinion? The Tanya. Ha'osa mimer biyavim, a person makes mimer in a woman. It's what Yevamos shaloi midaita against the will. Rabbi Omer kana. Rabbi says it's good, it's a good mimer, and you're married midarabanan v'chachamim melekana. The Chacham say no, you're not kana. Now says the Gemara, my time with the Rabbi. Why does Rabbi hold what he holds? Very simple. Gomer bia Yevama. He learns Mimer out from Yevama. What do we say by the Bia of Yevama? Ma Bia the Yevama Bal Karcha. Af Kedushin Yevama Bal Karcha. We're going to compare Mimer to Yibam. If we're Parsha of Yibam, and even if Yibam could be done Bal Karcha, shouldn't the Mimer be done Bal Karcha? That's why Rabbi says you can do that way. Rabbanan says no. Miri Mi Kedushin. The Alma. What is Mimer? Mimer is a type of Kedushin. So since it's a type of Kedushin, we know that you can't marry a woman Bal Karcha, a regular woman. Especially under the chuppah doesn't work. If you're sitting there with a gun, shotgun weddings don't work that way. Yeah. So ma kedushin the alma midaita, af kedushin the alma midaita. So they're arguing over which one to compare it to. They'll compare it more to Yibam that it has bal karcha. So we're back to this is like a lighter type of Gemara where
You say Yevamos, you can't do bal karcha.
Yibam you can do bal karcha. You can, yeah. Meaning you shouldn't, but yeah, if you did it, it works. Meaning kedushin bal karcha, I can put a gun to your head and say harei mekudeshli, and you accept it. Doesn't you're not my wife. But if you're my Yevama and I put a gun to your head and I say I'm a tuchus, I'm a bad guy, but the act itself works to create the connection.
But it's saying no, that we don't.
I'm talking about he's asking about no, he's talking about Yibum. We're not talking about Yibum. Yibum, yes, if he rapes her, he's a bad guy, but it works.
Right.
They're mad. The act, the sexual act itself by Yibum works even if it's balkarcha, even if it's force. What the Gemara is saying over here is what about the mimer? Mimer is a quasi kiddushin, right? So which one do we compare it? It's in the parsha of Yibum. So should we say that it falls under the rubric of Yibum rules, or it's a type of kiddushin and it falls under the rubric of kiddushin rules? So if it falls under kiddushin rules, then you cannot do it balkarcha. That'll be the opinion of the chachamim. And if you say that you can do balkarcha because it's under the Yibum rules, that'll be like Rebbe who says you can. And our brisa would be saying that if you wanted to do mimer and you didn't do mimer means that you did mimer balkarcha. Well, mimer balkarcha, according to the chachamim, is worthless. Does nothing. If there's nothing, the chiddush of the brisa is not like Rebbe. Okay, very good. Says the Gemara Weiler. But my kamifli, I mean, the Gemara just speaks it out a little lengthy over here. Mar savar milu diavami mimilu diavamo havelela melef. Mar savar milu di kedushin mimilu kedushin havelela melef. One says learn Yibum from Yibum. One says learn kedushin from kedushin, and they each look at mimer a little bit differently. Okay, that was the first case. Let's move on to the second case. What was the second case? Asa b'mimer. I need to just very quickly say in the next 4 minutes that we're about to learn something in Reb Shimon that we hadn't known yet. We brought up mimer earlier in Reb Shimon, but mimer, according to Reb Shimon, actually is not a kedushin derabbanan. We've been working under the assumption that the rabbis set up mimer. You know, it's an inappropriate thing to just do yibum. We want you to do ma'aseh kiddushin, so it's a kiddushin derabbanan. Reb Shimon has a unique shita in what mimer is. He says mimer is a suffix kiddushin. It's a subtle difference. Not a kiddushin derabbanan, it's a suffix kiddushin, meaning it's b'mitzias a suffix, meaning either we say mimer is like they're fully married. So if Reuven does mimer to Rachel, it's a suffix. Either they're completely married, or they're not married at all. There's not a middle ground of it's a derabbanan. It's either they're completely not married and mimer is literally nothing, or mimer is 100% like a kiknusa. We just found like a new version of kiknusa. So forget the zika kiknusa. This is Reb Shimon's opinion. I mean, this is how Rashi explains Reb Shimon. It's right above over here. So knowing that fact, knowing that Reb Shimon holds that mimer is not a kiddushin derabbanan, but rather it's a suffix, whether we say min haTorah it's kiknusa or not. So now let's work it out. What's that case of mimer? The case in the brisa was the chachamim said the way we've been learning mimer all along. It's a kiddushin derabbanan. So therefore, Dina still has a zika, but on a derabbanan level, she's a tzara serva, because technically the mimer with Rachel makes Dina midrabbanan a tzara serva. So therefore, you can't do Yibum with Dina. You got to do chalitza, and Rachel Levi's potter because she's an erva, right? That's how the chachamim learn. Reb Shimon said. Now let's go back to Reb Shimon's words. What was Reb Shimon's words? Reb Shimon said, we're not going to read it in the Gemara here, so I'm reading it from above. Reb Shimon said, "Bi'asa or chlitzasa shel achas mehem poteres tzarasa." That Yibum or chalitza with Dina paters Rachel. So let's work it out. Take a look on the board, yeah? If let's say I assume, forget it says Yibum there, it says mimer, right? So that means Reuven did mimer with Rachel. Real mimer. According to Reb Shimon, it's a suffix kiddushin deraisa or nothing. So that means if you say the tzad of the suffix that they're married, so now Rachel is married to Reuven, so then Rachel and Dina are fully married to Reuven. When Reuven dies, both of those ladies are falling, according to Reb Shimon, to Levi, and they're both fine for Yibum or Chalitza, because remember, according to him, once Reuven does Yibum, that completely erases the history. So the fact that Rachel was once an erva is irrelevant.
Right.
So then Yibum or Chalitza with Dina takes care of both, because they're both part of one house. And let's say you say that Rachel is not mimered at all to Reuven. Well, then, of course, it's going to be okay. Why? Because then what's Rachel? Rachel's just an erva. Erva's potter on her own. And then Dina needs a Yibum or a Chalitza. So says Reb Shimon, Bi'asa oichlitzasa shel Dina takes care of everything. Because either way of the suffix, well, you need. Either Dina and Rachel are part of the home. One house only gets one Yibum. So Dina's Yibum knocks out Rachel. Or they're not part of the home. Why? Because Rachel is still an erva. And Mimer does nothing. Well, if she's an erva, then she goes free on her own. There's no Yibum or Chalitza. So either way you go with the suffix, Bi'asa oichlitzasa, you could do Bia with Dina. What did Reb Shimon say after that? He said, Chalatz lebalas maimer lo nifter tzara. If you did chalitza with Rachel, that does not help. Why? It doesn't help Dina. Why? Let's say you did chalitza with Rachel. If Rachel is part of Reuven's home, then yes, that helps, because then they're both married to Reuven. When Reuven dies, chalitza with Rachel takes care of Dina. But what if they're not? If they're not married, then what is Rachel? She's an erva. Doing chalitza with an erva. How's that going to help Dina? Dina's married to Reuven. Reuven dies. Dina still has a zika.
What is the first part? Oh, because they're part of the same house.
So part of the same house. But if they're not part of the same house, then what's Rachel? She's just a floating erva. Giving chalitza to a floating erva is like throwing. It's like spitting in the rain. It does nothing. It's a waste of time. Yeah. And what's Dina? Dina's married to Reuven. Reuven dies. She still needs a yibam chalitza. So that's what now we all of a sudden understand Reb Shimon's statement. So says the Gemara. What I just spoke out, the Gemara is going to sort of speak out now in detail. Let's say Reuven did Maimer with Rachel and afterwards Levi was born. So really the order is irrelevant. You have Reuven with a Maimer with Rachel, like we just explained, and now Reuven dies. What did the Chachamim say? Rishona yotze b'shum eshes ha'chash l'hoi ba'olamo. Rachel's nothing to talk about. She's always an erva. V'shniya dina chaletz islam yisabem. So Shimon Aimer, Shimon said, Bi'asa, the yibam, oichlitzasa, or the chalitza, shal achas mehen, which here means Dina. P'teres terasa knocks out Rachel, like we said, miman of shach, because either Rachel and Dina are both married to Reuven, yibam of one knocks out the zika of the other, or they're not married at all. We get Rachel's an erva, because again, according to Reb Shimon, if she has not married Reuven now, she's just a floating erva. Even Reb Shimon agrees to that. Reb Shimon, what's Reb Shimon? The Gemara is going to speak this out. Reb Shimon, when he says this statement, what's he talking about? If it's talking about where Levi was born first, and then the Maimer was done, so then really Levi was born into a world where Rachel's an erva. There's nothing to talk about. Because if he hasn't done Maimer at all, then Levi's born into a world where even Reb Shimon would agree that Rachel is an erva. Nothing to talk about, right? So how could you say that now that you do Maimer, that's going to fix anything? If you do Maimer now, what's Maimer doing? Maimer's on the tzad that it's considered a kiddushin. Well, Rachel's already an erva.
It's too late.
It's too late. You can't marry her now, right? Reuven marrying Rachel is just bringing an erva of Levi's into the marriage. So that's an erva and a tzaras erva, right? So that doesn't help. Says the Gemara, Ha'amras b'nolad l'basof yibam. You already told me that Reb Shimon doesn't argue with the Chachamim. He agrees that if Levi is born before Yibam, that's an erva. So if the Maimer hasn't happened yet, and we haven't accomplished this fancy Maimer being Kona 100% Minat Torah, you haven't fixed anything. Ella, what are we talking about? The Gemara, this is the conclusion. Ella, Asaba Maimer, ve'ach kach noilad lo'ach. We're talking about a case where Maimer was done first, then Levi's born, and so now there's a suffix. Is the Maimer kind or not kind? But it makes perfect sense. Because now, like we explained before, if Maimer was done and then Levi's born, he's being born into a world where either Rachel's married to Reuven, in which case she's not an erva anymore, as Shimon's opinion, or she's not, in which case she's an erva. But regardless, Yibam or Chalitza with Dina knocks out everything. What's the second half? Chalitz labalas Maimer. If let's say he does Chalitza in that case to Rachel, Nifter Tzara, Dina's still stuck. My timer. Gemara says very simple. V'shum dahav Tzara vadai. Dina's for sure married to Reuven. Ubalas Maimer Suffolk, and Rachel's only Suffolk married to Reuven. Ain't Suffolk motzi midei vadai. We don't say a Suffolk is going to cover the responsibilities of a vadai. So the Chalitza with Rachel only takes care of Dina if Rachel and Reuven are married. But if they're not married, then it doesn't. We'll pause here because I think it's time to start. In terms of okay, so the question about the next thing is like this.